Okay. Welcome back to another Hard NOC Life live from CrossLines at the Smithsonian. I'm here with YA fantasy author Ellen O, also hashtag creator and all-around awesome person on the internet. Welcome to CrossLines, Ellen.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Hi.
So before we get started, can we talk a little bit about, you are a YA fantasy author. Can you talk about some of the work that you've done in that space and what led you to become a writer of all things?
In the year 2000, Time magazine named Genghis Khan Man of the Millennium. And I was so shocked that an Asian man was called Man of the Millennium that I went and I did all this research on him. And in the process, I found out all this Asian history that I'd never heard about, like Korean history, Chinese history, Japanese history. And we never learn about that because, let's face it, world history in American schools is actually white history.
Yeah.
So, I was just like, wow, this is great. And I said, we have to write about this. Somebody should be writing about it. And I just decided that it was a good time maybe for me to, write a book and kind of bring other people in our country an understanding of a different culture, legends, myths, a lot of wonderful things.
So I know the prophecy, right? It's based on a lot of Korean myth. We'll talk about some of the hashtags you've started, but it was very important for you to imbue a lot of these stories with Korean mythology, because when we think of mythology, like you said, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, is very Northern European, and there's Greek mythology, but you never see a lot of Asian mythology. And why was that important?
Because it's different. It's not always fairies and elves. I mean, frankly, I get tired of fairies and elves. I want to read about bloodthirsty gumios, fox demons with 9 tails that eat men's hearts and livers. I think that's fabulous. Yeah. I mean, fairy tales in general tend to be dark.
Right.
And I think Asian mythology and legends have a lot of those elements that really do transfer over to any audience of fairy tale fans.
Right. Well, it's funny because a lot of the fantasies that when you see, if you go back to Asia, a lot of the wuxia and those kung fu, those are fantasy. That's Chinese fantasy, right?
Exactly.
Why has it been so hard for that type of storytelling to translate?
It translates, but it's always told from a white lens. I mean, I think it's the other problem. It's exotified, it's othered, it isn't the same. And I think it's I'm sure these authors mean well. I mean, they're finding something unique and different, and they want to share that with the audience. But it's not always told from the right cultural aspect, or from kind of the real kind of meanings behind a lot of these legends and stories. And I think that having own voices, which is a really important movement, is to let people from that culture tell their stories.
Yeah.
And give perspective that American audiences don't have.
Right.
I'm not saying you can't get rid of all of them. I'm saying it's another perspective, and it's an important part of the discussion.
Well, and I think that's the other difference too, is that when people think American, they think white, and they don't necessarily consider Asian American.
Right.
And I think that's another reason why it's important to have these diverse voices too, to represent that America doesn't look like one thing.
Exactly. And it is very sad, for example, when you hear somebody will say to an Asian person, "Oh, I don't think of you as Asian because you're so you're so white." They take away the fact that we're also American.
Right.
That's something that we have to kind of talk about, this constant othering, without them even realizing that they're doing it.
Right.
The fact that we're Asian, we can't take that away from us.
Right.
But we're also American.
And I think that's why it's Asian American is important, right? It's not it's not just having Asian representation. It's this idea that, because I think a lot of times in America, it's well, you have we did Crouching Tiger, so that should hold you for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
But it's that's still not an Asian American story necessarily.
No, and the other thing that really gets me upset is when people say, "Oh, well, people in Japan don't have a problem with whitewashing. People in China don't have a problem with it." Well, we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
Their society is completely different. Our experience is not the same. Because we're American, and every time they do that, they forget that major component.
Right. Well, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with a segment talking about your life on the internet, which is a whole nother chapter of your career. So we'll be right back with Ellen. But one of the things that you're also known for beyond your fantasy work is you started this movement a few years ago called We Need Diverse Books. It started out as a hashtag,
Yeah.
and then it became a movement. Can you talk about the origins of We Need Diverse Books and where it is today?
It always starts with a conversation, and I think in that case, I was at a festival, and it was with my good friends Meg Medina and Lamar Giles, and we had just come from a panel where there were more people of color, writers of color on the panel than there were white authors. And we were like, yeah, this is awesome, this is great. The conversation was really strong, and it was a great conversation. And when we went back to the green room, we were talking about how there needs to be more representation at these events and festivals all the time. And that's kind of like when I turned to Lamar and said, Lamar, I think we have to do something really big. I don't know what it is, but I think we have to do something. And I started having the conversations on Twitter, and more people started saying, yeah, I want to do something about it. We got like 22 people together, and we just started this whole hashtag movement. And I think the most surprising thing for us was how it moved everybody. Like, it was not just about Asian Americans, but it was about Black Americans and Latinos and disabled community and LGBT youth. Like, everybody had a story about why not seeing themselves represented in books had hurt them in some way. And I don't think any of us really expected to be so kind of moved by it, but it was, because it was a hashtag campaign that was also with pictures and with words and with stories.
Right.
And it really resonated with everyone. And what became also clear was that the publishing industry is also willing to make changes when you call them out on it. Because there are people, not everybody, but there are a lot of people who want to see change happen because they care about the kids. Because the audience is about what we can do right for our kids, right? And so that's why we ended up becoming a nonprofit. We raised a lot of money. We started grants and internships and mentors and the Walter D. Myers Award. And we've really kind of begun to establish these programs that are affecting good change in the industry.
Well, I think that's something too. Like, I mean, maybe people may or may not be aware. Like, a lot of people, I think, know that We Need Diverse Books is a hashtag. But I like that you brought up the fact that it's also a nonprofit now. It's beyond. It's moved beyond just a hashtag on Twitter. And it's actually a thing. When did that decision happen? Like, how did you move from let's tweet and tweet and tweet to let's do stuff about it and create this nonprofit?
I think because we were talking about books for kids, it had to have an actual resolution. Something really had to happen and change. Especially with children's publishing. Lee and Lowe did a lot of statistics where they showed that books about people of color are like less than 10%. There have been a lot of statistics that show the absolute dearth of representation in children's books. And we all know that this is our most precious resource. The future is in our kids. So if we don't change that, then we affect all of our futures. So I think it was like imperative to all of us that something good come out of it, not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it. So that's why, like, when we went to BEA, we already went with this idea that these are the things we want to do. These are the things that we think will make change happen, and it has. Not because we did it, but because everybody got behind it. Gatekeepers, librarians, teachers, parents, publishers, editors, agents. All these really important people got behind the movement and donated resources, donated money, and that's really made the movement become an organization that can give sustaining grants to writers of color who've never been published, who might not be able to. Like, we've had tremendous success stories. Like, one of our grant winners got a major book deal and a movie deal, and would she have been there without the grant? Who knows? It's stories like that. We placed 3 interns of color with publishing houses. We are going to give 10 internships this year, place them in publishing houses, in agencies, and we get to do that because of the support of the industry. Like authors like Emily Jenkins and a lot of wonderful people who have given a lot of money, like Daniel Handler, and I don't even know, I can't start because there's so many.
Right. Well, I mean, I think We Need Diverse Books has definitely made an impact in the world of publishing. You've actually taken that kind of experience and have moved into a different space that we'll talk about in a minute, how you've taken the lessons you've learned from We Need Diverse Books, and now you've turned your attention to Hollywood. So we're going to talk about that in a second. Back with L&O in 1 minute.
We were talking about We Need Diverse Books, but this month, May, you kind of taken the lessons learned from We Need Diverse Books, launched a new hashtag movement with yours truly and some other folks. We want to give shout outs to everybody on the team, but can you talk about the impetus behind hashtag whitewashed out and how that relates to We Need Diverse Books and beyond?
Well, I think that it's really different from We Need Diverse Books. It feels different. I think that it's just two very different industries.
Yeah.
So I feel like publishing really hasn't invested interest in really addressing that dearth of diversity for children. But I don't get the sense that Hollywood has that same interest.
Right.
So it's really up to us as a community to raise our voices and talk about the fact that this is harmful. This is, in fact, an ongoing harm that is being done to, past generations and future generations. If we don't address it, it continues a cycle of stereotyping and hatred, not just against us, but self-hatred even within our our own communities.
So what was the impetus behind starting another hashtag? Specifically whitewashed out. How did that happen?
Well,
I know how it happened.
Yeah.
Nobody else knows how it happened.
Right. So Constance Wu talked about having a call to action from the community. And I remember sitting there and going, she's right. We have to do something about it. And who's the first person I contacted? Keith. The funny story is you were on board right away. And Keith says, yeah, I even have an idea for a hashtag. We'll call it whitewashed up. And I said, great, we'll call it whitewashed out. I have no idea how that happened.
Well, I think that works better.
I know, it was funny.
It worked better. So yeah, I had nothing to do with it because it was my idea didn't even get used, but it's fine.
It's two of your words.
But I think you're absolutely right that it's necessary. I mean, I took a lot of inspiration from We Need Diverse Books because I think more along the lines of this hashtag became a movement. This hashtag became an organization, and it's had real results. What do you see for? I mean, Whitewashed Out trended the first day. We invited Margaret Cho to do a Twitter chat, and that first day it was the #2 trend on Twitter. I feel like it's launched 1,000 think pieces, in the New York Times and other areas. What is your goal or hope for the next phase beyond just these weekly Twitter chats we've been having with Asian celebrities?
I think really that the community, we have to kind of continue the conversation with the community, because one of the things that I notice is that because we have a strong immigration, generation in our communities, arts aren't always kind of supported, right? Everybody wants us to be doctors and lawyers. So when we have that kind of a background, arts is always kind of that place that nobody pays attention to. I think that really has to change within our community. We have to support our own talent. Whether it's our writers, whether it's our actors and directors, we have to support that. And I feel like we have to put our money where our mouths are too, which means we have to support those indie projects that come up. We have to buy the books by the Asian community authors. We have to, support the films by Asian American directors. Somehow galvanize the community to really support the arts. I feel like that's really where we have to start, because otherwise, where can we take that?
Right. Well, and I think that's definitely, there's that ground zero, because I think it's also a two-pronged front too, because Hollywood is, has its own kind of structure. Like you said, it's completely different from the publishing industry.
Yeah.
And how do you break into that and convince the people making decisions in Hollywood to foster more talent if the talent isn't being fostered within our own community?
Right.
So that's kind of the two.
I feel that you have to have both.
Yeah.
And then if we aren't supportive of our own people, how can we expect anyone else to support them?
Right.
Right? So let's build that love and support within our community. You know, support arts. Support arts.
Support arts, but also hold Hollywood's feet to the fire.
And hold their feet to the fire. Absolutely.
It has to be both, right?
Yeah, it has to be both.
Because I think one of the things we can't like excuse the fact that things like Doctor Strange, Ghost in the Shell, Aloha continue to happen, and we can't say, well, it's because we don't support the art. Like there's two levels.
I mean, yellow facing is still happening. I mean, come on, like how many years after Mickey Rooney's horrible Breakfast and Tiffany run do we still have Cloud Atlas happen and do that again? That just slapped me in the face and kicked me in the ass at the same time. It's seriously, it feels never ending.
Well, I think, and what we'll pick up in the last segment is kind of like, I feel like there is a natural bridge between like diverse books and diverse Hollywood, because a lot of things, you know, coming from the comic space especially, Hollywood takes a lot of cues from like the literary world in a sense, because all the blockbuster movies are adaptations of YA fantasy, science fiction, comic books. So I think there is a bit of a bridge that diverse books and diverse Hollywood can kind of share. So we'll talk about that in the next segment.
Okay.
All right, back one more time with Ellen O from We Need Diverse Books, Whitewashed Out, Prophecy. What's the name of the forthcoming book?
It's right now it's called Spirit Hunters.
So right now it's a tentative title?
Well, I hope it stays. We'll see. It's a ghost story with Korean shamans, so I'm like really excited about that.
Did you have a date yet?
Well, it's fall 2017.
Okay.
So it's sometime. So I wanted to make a little bridge between like the work you do with diverse books and the work you're doing with Whitewashed Out. You know, because Hollywood does base a lot of its intellectual properties on like existing works. How do you think having a diverse, you know, set of science fiction, fantasy, comic books, how can that help the diversity problem in Hollywood?
You know, it's a really good point, and I totally agree that there is that connection, because I think like 20 years ago you didn't have a lot of female action heroes, female kind of led, you know, projects, but where YA kind of broke out with strong female characters, now you're seeing kind of that same thing happening in Hollywood, and I do think that that's probably driven by what they're getting from the publishing side. So yeah, if publishing could really get behind a lot of these a lot of diverse books and books by people of color, LGBT authors, and also from like even for the disabilities community, so that you don't have that movie that's coming out that's very upsetting to people. I forget.
There's so many.
It's very upsetting to the disabilities community, because it's the whole idea of a non-disabled character. You know, it's problematic because it really makes the disability community feel othered.
Well, you know, and I think that's definitely another important part of this, like defining what diversity means.
Right.
Because I think what both We Need Diverse Books and Whitewashed Out, and even Oscars So White, like people tend to think of it as in like, you know, black and white terms, for lack of a better word. But diversity means more than just, you know, like inclusion and diversity means all types of people.
Right.
And like whether it's like race, sexuality, gender, disability, like diversity is all encompassing, and too often conversations around diversity tend to focus only on race or only on gender.
Right.
They forget it's intersectional, which is, you know, appropriate and relevant for the fact that we're at a cultural lab on intersectionality.
Right,
but
exactly.
it is about intersections. It's about
is.
You know, being female and gay and transgender and black and white and Asian and Latino and Native American. Like there are so many communities that it isn't just having one doesn't mean like it's a victory for all, right? Like
Exactly.
it's got to be inclusive.
I mean, and you look at Hollywood and like they do this it's not just to us, it's not just to the Asian community. It's like Stonewall, where they do here they like completely forget about the black activist trans character. I mean, the real person behind the movement, and focus on a fictionalized white guy. You know, things like that. This is what always kind of happens. Focus on the white guy or focus on the white person in the story, and forget about all the marginalized communities. And I think that's like, people don't like the word diverse, and I understand why, but it's almost about like representing marginalized communities, because these are the communities that are always forgotten, that are not given credence, that are not represented.
But they also make up the country.
Yes.
Like they are what America looks like.
Exactly.
And you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people, because maybe a team of Asian Americans created the whitewashed out tag, and that Asian erasure is an issue in Hollywood. It's not just Asian people. Like look at Pan and Lone Ranger and Gods of Egypt and like all people of color are being erased, or at least white actors are playing roles that should go to people of color, and it's a problem industry-wide.
It's a continual problem. And this whole idea that, we can't get behind an actor of color because they don't have name value or some kind of blockbuster status. And then, who do they cast all the time with all those flops?
We talk about Chris Hemsworth. Like, you take away the Thor in Avengers movies, that guy is not a movie star. Like, every movie he's in tanks at the box office.
Right.
But he's on talk shows. He's a movie star. He's in all the magazines. But yeah, you don't. Asian American actors of color aren't given the same kind of like leeway. Lexi Alexander, who's a female director, she's a half Arab female director, talks about movie jail. Like when you're a woman director and you do one flop, you're in movie jail and you're not allowed to do any more movies. Meanwhile, like white male directors, they have flops all the time and it doesn't matter. They're always given chances. A dozen chances to succeed, and then once they succeed, it's like, we knew you were going to be a success all along, and other people aren't afforded that same opportunity.
Exactly. So it's that kind of like the lack of faith in us, and I think it goes hand in hand with too much faith in white men to maybe always tell the stories as opposed to giving other people a chance. And I'm not knocking white men. I'm just saying that just even the playing ground. That's all.
And it's not I think what the other thing that's important is that other people's perspectives are just as relatable.
Exactly.
The white male story is not the only default story that.
Right.
And because I think you should give credit to white people. They should be able to identify with non-white people.
Exactly.
Because we have to identify with white people in stories all the time. So
we're used to it.
It's not that hard.
We grew up on it. We're used to identifying with white culture.
So hashtag whitewashed out Tuesday at noon.
Yes.
Thank you, Ellen, for coming out to the Smithsonian.
Thank you, Keith. It's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you guys for sticking around listening to us. We're going to wrap up, but if you have any questions you want to talk to Ellen about, she'll be here for a few more minutes, and it'll be all good. Thanks.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yo. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard NOC Life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share the interest together with a similar kind. When they said Don Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments, and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC in full color, you see me?